few answers from all of you. Among the movies that released recently, if you can just raise your hands, how many of you saw Bahubali in a cinema hall? That's largely, anywhere between 95 to 100% of the crowd. That's great to know. Dunkirk? How many of you saw it at an IMAX screen? That's quite a few. And another lovely movie that came earlier this year, I'd really like to know how many of you saw that at a cinema. So a movie called Anarkali of Araha. Very nice story, I believe. Great reviews, very acclaimed. Raise your hands, please. At a cinema? I don't see any. I think we are at the cusp of an era where there's going to be clear demarcation and distinction between the kind of content we're going to consume on a large screen versus the kind of content that we'll consume here or on the television screens. And the four representatives that you see from companies here, that's IMAX, Qube, Dolby, and Harkness, are very pioneering companies that are here to create that difference in terms of the exhibition platform that will enable movies like Bahubali or Dunkirk, which are made for that scale, and the experience of watching those cannot be replicated here on the largest TV screen that you see. So before we, without wasting much time, I'd like John, if you can throw some light on what IMAX is doing on this front and the plans for India, please. Over to you.
Sure. You make a very good point in that the lines are blurring in terms of where people consume their content. If it's going to be on their iPhone, the iPad, the computer, and what have you, and the larger screen, or in a cinema. And one of the reasons I believe that there's been a massive growth in giant screen cinemas, premium large format, what have you, is just down to the fact that cinema operators around the world recognize that they need to provide something unique, something different, an environment that you just can't get at home, you can't replicate at home, and that's led to, you know, explosive growth not only for IMAX. You know, 10 years ago IMAX had 300 screens around the world. Today we have 1,275 theaters in 75 countries, and we've got another 575 theaters under development. So, you know, a massive growth. And last year, for example, we had our biggest year ever, you know, globally in terms of sales, where we added another 360 contracts, which, you know, far surpassed anything that we've ever done. And it's mainly because our clients, the cinema operators, recognize that they need to provide these environments that you know, cinema consumers want to go and, you know, watch a movie in. It really only takes a family to invest in a big screen TV for their house for you to potentially lose a consumer. So if there's not a big difference between what you have in your cinema hall and what somebody can develop in their home, you know, you potentially can lose one of your customers, and that's something you don't want to do. So I think one of my sort of key points is, you know, if you're developing a new cinema, if you're looking at upgrading your complex, you really need to focus on the overall package. So not only big screens, but comfortable seats, comfortable environments, everything which is going to drive consumers to your cinema. You know, one of our top cinemas in India is in Chennai, at Jazz, at the Escape Complex, not Escape, Phoenix Market City, thank you. And it's one of the most beautiful cinemas in the world. And you know, when you go there, customers are, you know, taking selfies. You know, it's just such a unique environment to go to the movie in. And it's just something that people are not going to build at home. So, you know, that's sort of my one sort of point, is that, you know, as an industry, we need to make sure that we're doing things to differentiate ourselves from where people can consume their content. Because as internet speeds and streaming speeds increase in India and mobile internet and what have you, you're going to get a lot of people consuming their content, be it TV, be it their cinema content at home and on their devices. So.
Thank you, John. That's interesting indeed. Now, moving on from what you see to what you hear, immersiveness is, in terms of the differentiating experience, is not just about what you see, it's also a lot about what you hear. And one of the pioneering technologies in India for that has been Dolby's new toy, which is Atmos. With almost 300 screens in India that are already operational with the technology. And clearly there has been, not just in the trade, but also among the audience, it becomes a talking point. When there is a big action movie, or a sci-fi film, or one of the Marvel movies like Thor or Avengers, the preference usually for most people by now is the Atmos screen, and they've begun. Raj, it's interesting that we're here right now. I'd like to tell you this. I have a lot of friends who actually chase, the property, the screen in that property which has an Atmos screen. Atmos equipment for those kind of movies. So it would be lovely to hear from you about the difference that you are making to the screens with Atmos and all that you're bringing in with Dolby for the immersive experience on the PLF format.
Well, to start with, thank you very much for the compliments. It's not so big, but yeah, it is growing. I think it is not just premium large format, but what we are talking about is experience. And how it is important for the industry as a whole. If you see, it is a cycle. I mean, when we started, probably we had large screens, single screens. The large format experience was guaranteed. People were using good quality projection, they were using good quality audio, and that continuous improvement was always on. What happened in between was people realized that the toilets are not clean, the seats are not good, the ambience is not good, and the focus shifted to those things. In the process, the technology, the core experience got a bit, hampered, I would say. There was a time, especially in India, if you see in Indian circumstances, it is now coming back. I would say whether it is Epic, which is being launched by Qube, or IMAX, which is the leader in the premium large format, or there are now, the major exhibition chains starting with their special offerings. It is basically to now focus again back, and Atmos becomes one part of it. Finally, why you go to a theater and not watch something on the mobile or on your computer is because you want to have a differentiated experience. And I think that is where all these technologies, the different rendering of visuals, the audio that you do, it should make you feel you are getting something which you can't get anywhere outside of a cinema screen. And that is where probably the success of this industry lies. Because remember that today, people of my age or little younger to me probably will still go to a theater because we know what that experience is. My son doesn't want to really go every time to a theater because he is not really exposed. He is always seeing all those not really good big screens in Bombay where I stay. So, I mean, when I took him first to a big screen and he saw that, I mean, he was like, oh, it can be that good. So people just don't know. So I think it is a responsibility that all of us share, that we should have that experience part coming in and retained, which will help us keep the industry going and which will retain this beautiful industry that we have created over a period of time.
Thank you. Coming to you, Senthil, IMAX, of course, has been around globally. They have a significant footprint. You are at the cusp of launching the new baby in the PLF format, which is Epic. And it would be lovely if the audience, especially the exhibitors here, can know more about it, about the experience, about the difference it makes to the exhibition experience. Please.
Sure. Thanks, Akshay. So basically, we were looking at what it is that we can take for granted. I think all of us eat at home. We also like to go out for a meal with family and friends and have a social experience outside the home. So I don't think personally, and I hope all of you are confident that cinema as a medium is here for the long run, and that it's always going to be complementary to watching things at home, which is also here for the long run. Now with video on demand and mobile becoming fast enough for a great movie experience or a video experience on the phone, we do have the threat that people take what's easy to consume and consume it more. So we need to make that social experience of going out to the movies something that's spectacular, which is so enjoyable that people want to do it more often and do it again and again. So India has always had this star culture and the enjoyment of watching premieres and big star releases with a large crowd of like-minded people and enjoying that experience. It's like going to a game and watching and being enthused by the cheering around you or by the groans around you. So if you really want the movie watching experience in a theater to reach that level of involvement, you need to keep the experience so good and make the spectacle sufficiently differentiated from the home that people are enthused to go out again and again. That's what we set out to do with Epic. Make an experience with a brand so that people will recognize that brand and go out. Epic is something that can take a number of our larger single screens and some of the largest screens within the cities and make them something that's branded in a way that people recognize that it's a certain level of picture and sound quality, a certain viewing experience in terms of angle, in terms of contrast, in terms of brightness, in terms of immersive sound, and know that when they go to this Epic cinema, it's going to be something that they'll enjoy and there's a certain minimum level of quality that they can expect. I think that's very important because without that, it's a random experience each time. I don't know whether I'm going to get as good an experience in this theater, and unless I go there first and or read reviews about a theater, I don't know what I'm going to get. Now the other question is, what kind of movies will be best served in larger screens? And of course, the easy answer is all the spectacle movies, the Dunkirks, the movies with Salman Khan, or the movies with Rajinikanth, or the movies with Ajit, or any of the superstar movies. But that's the easy answer, and it's also it is true. But every movie is actually benefited from being seen in the right environment. Any of you who've watched a movie on a small screen once and then happen to see it again in a better environment might suddenly realize that you saw aspects of the movie that you never thought you'd, that maybe you failed to notice in the previous experience. Excuse me. And that's what makes the difference in an environment where there's a lot of detail that's staring at you and a lot of little subconscious inputs that go into it and make you enjoy that experience more. And when it's a lot of like-minded people in a large auditorium, it then makes it even better. So the first Epic screen is going to be in a rural part of India. It's a 100-foot screen, larger than any other screen in India, and probably one of the largest in Asia. But it's in a rural area, so it's going to be a very interesting experiment to see how that brings the audience back to the theater. In my mind, it's not an experiment at all, because I'm pretty sure that it's going to be one of the highest attendance screens in that state. It's going to be in Andhra Pradesh and opening later this year. So I'm looking forward to that experiment being a resounding success, and many more people adopting large screens, not just Epic. I think IMAX has been such a pioneer in this field, and Dolby has an amazing experience with Dolby Cinema. But what we've done with Epic is make something that's also more affordable and works for the large majority of our theaters in India.
Thank you, Senthil. Talking of the immersive experience that cannot be replicated either on the television or on the phone or the handheld devices, one of the differentiating factors is 3D. And of course, Hollywood has a lot of movies that come in the 3D format, not as much in India yet. But one of the companies that enables the experience of 3D in cinemas is Harkness, courtesy their screens. Preetham, you may want to throw some light on the difference that you make with Harkness for the PLF, and particularly to the kind of content that essentially requires your kind of screens for the 3D experience, which makes it more immersive.
Right. To start with, you know, it's a bit of a lost format in the sense that there is no definition to a PLF. What do we say when we say PLF? Can the screen size be a PLF format? What is the parameters to call something a PLF? If you go into Europe, you're talking about adding HDR with what Eclair is doing into a sort of a premium large format. Some of the cinemas are concentrating more on seats and sort of sound. Some are looking at screens. Besides some of the large formats, I know at least I can name 2 large cinema chains in Asia who have tried to get into the PLF and not actually got it right because they can't package it right. Packaging a cinema with the right screen, the right server, the right sound system is not easy, and getting the right light levels on the screen is not easy. And that's not something that has happened, at least with these 2 large cinema chains in Asia. So with what IMAX is doing, or with what Qube is doing and Dolby is doing, that's where the trick of the game is, which they know how to package this, right? So a lot of cinema chains have actually come up to me and said, oh, our screens are dark, can we just change the screen? Does that just solve the problem? Not really. You know, I can make larger screens. We just opened a factory in China and that can make 16 meter high screens with whatever aspect ratios you'd like. But you know, it's just not the screen, but it's the whole packaging, which is what. At the end of the day, though, you're not looking back into the projector and thinking, oh, why is that dark or why is that bright? You're looking at the screen and going, that image is not that good. And I take the brunt of it because, you know, my screen probably is the best, but you know, have you packaged it right to get the right optimum light levels on the screen? That's the question to ask. But coming back to the point of PLF, we're excited. I was looking at some numbers and I was thinking, you know, anything above a 9.5 meter screen is a pretty large screen in height. And we did about 2 screens last year in about last 12 months. In the last 9 months, we've done about 6 screens which are over 9.5 meters. And that's a good news because, you know, obviously those kind of real estate spaces and boxes are available today. Most often those are not things that are easy to get. You could put up as high a screen as you want, but are they really available in metros? Can you go into a shopping mall and say, I want to put up a 15-20 meter high screen? I mean, everybody on this panel can put up screens that high, but is that available? Question, right? So where it's available, can you drive high ticket prices? So in a tier 2 city, if you make that investment into a large screen, can you push your ticket prices higher, or can you make that feasible and viable? So those are the questions, but we are excited. We think PLF is here to stay. As in the introduction they said, there's over 2,500 screens, and it's about 2,600 screens, and half of it is IMAX. And they've led the path, and Dolby is picking up, and they're, I think, at about 150 screens. I know there was a big deal with AMC. So it's all picking up. Everybody wants to get into the game. We're excited. We can make large screens. So if anybody is looking at it, and call us.
Nice. And when you talk of the immersive experience, one of course is the largest screen that you get as an option, which is either IMAX or Epic. And then there is an equally immersive experience, a lot different of course, but that is something you can experience on the smallest screen that you have, and that's virtual reality, which is one of the buzzwords. Raj, we were having this conversation before we walked in, and it would be interesting if you can throw some light on the impact something like virtual reality will have on our business when it comes to captivating the young audience in the country. Of course, we're not talking about feature-length films because perhaps the attention span of the people on the VR format may not be as much, but it's entertainment that's being consumed nevertheless.
I mean, I believe that, you know, what is happening is you are competing with many things. You're competing with cricket, you're competing with television, you're competing with VR, you're competing with all types of entertainment that people want and consume. And what you're saying is very evident that the younger generation is more hooked to something which is shorter, which is crisp and probably, you know, easier, because that is how they are. The attention span is definitely a problem. But I think what happens is everybody has his share. I think Senthil will be in a better position, or even John will be a better person to answer this. But everything has a space. I mean, you don't, as I was saying, you don't replace your dinner with a dessert. You basically have everything in its own proportion. And I think this whole experience in a cinema is something which cannot be replicated at home. What we need to do is definitely tweak the models, business models for India, because I don't think what works worldwide will work in India, because of your low ticket price, because of the cost structure, because of the complexities, because of the taxation, you name it and you have it. All the problems are in India. You don't even get the real estate to do this. So it's how we tweak it and make it work. I mean, just to draw a parallel, India has around 3,000 DCI screens, right? Now, out of 3,000 DCI screens, India has done 300 Atmos screens. That's a 10% penetration, which is probably highest worldwide. And we have a ticket price which is $2, and worldwide ticket price is around $15. So you have to find the sweet spot, and this business will tick, is what, I mean, we believe that if you tweak it right, if you look at all the parameters, people want it. It's a differentiated experience. And if you do it right, then you can be successful. And if you see the business model of what Qube is doing with Epic, I mean, IMAX is special, it's big, it's world leader as far as the PLF is concerned. But what Senthil has done is probably tweaked it to suit more for the Indian requirement, where you find that sweet spot where, you know, more people can afford it, more people will do it, and it will become a bigger movement. That's how I would probably look at it.
Right. Taking a cue from what Preetham and you said, Senthil, is something I'd like to ask you on this front. Obviously, when you're talking about that sort of a screen size, may not be 100 feet like the one you're starting, but substantially big ones. There's only so much of space that you can get in the retail spaces, which are malls. And maybe a good natural partner for something like Epic or IMAX for that matter would be the existing bigger sized single screens which already have possibly the scale, the size, the volume to have an integration with Epic. And if you don't do that, then and you're creating a new space, it obviously implies that you're giving as much of space, which is a hell lot, to only one flow of revenues, which is cinema. So, and obviously when you're looking at adapting Epic, it's not just about the screen, it's not just about the projector and the sound, it's also about the civil work that goes into creating it. So talking on the feasibility of that, maybe you may want to, throw some light there.
I'm completely in agreement that I think greenfield sites are not the best option or the only option, given the cost of real estate in India. It's certainly the best thing to convert existing screens, but there is a considerable capital cost in conversion like that, because a lot has to change. It's not simply changing the equipment, it's changing the layout of the cinema as well, which might mean that maybe you could make 2 smaller screens and 1 Epic screen out of existing large screens, and that's a very real possibility. But yeah, you're right in pointing out that malls and new constructions are seriously in threat because of the costs and because the retail boom has died before it really began in India, with e-commerce coming in to eat up that lunch.
Coming back to you, John, IMAX, of course, a couple of weeks ago has been the buzzword, courtesy a movie called Dunkirk, where I'm sure you've seen there are a lot of publications that have put out articles. These formats have been around for the longest time, but only now there have been articles that have been put out for the audience to consume, which explain the difference between 35mm, 75mm, and IMAX. And that's all been driven by one movie called Dunkirk. In some way, I think that it's also, for the PLF, it's largely the content that is going to drive the people to the cinemas. We can create these exhibition spaces, but then people ultimately come not to check out in IMAX or in Epic, but people come to watch a movie. So the importance of the right kind of content to be created to support these formats is something I'd love to hear from you about.
Sure. This is something where, this is a point where IMAX probably has a little bit of an unfair advantage over our competition, in that we've been working in this space for 50 years. We started off in the museum and science business, and we developed a suite of technologies, cameras, post-production, everything related to making content for giant screens. At that time, IMAX giant screens. And over the years, as we got into the Hollywood space, we started to develop the suites, tailor them to working with the major movie directors and producers. So when it comes to a film like, for example, Transformers this summer, or Dunkirk, both those movies were shot primarily with IMAX technology. So they were using our technology to make the movies. And when that happens, so we basically start at the very outset of production, and we run throughout the whole chain all the way for until the movie comes on the IMAX screen. So for a movie like Transformers, Michael Bay will use our 3D cameras, shoot the movie in native 3D, which makes a very difference in quality. And then when it's screened on the IMAX system, there's a discernible difference. And the same thing with a movie like Dunkirk with Christopher Nolan. Christopher Nolan is a huge IMAX fan. He virtually lives in our office in Los Angeles. And he uses all sorts of techniques that nobody else does when he makes his movies, because he's a purist in quality. He's fanatical about quality. And so he basically shot the movie Dunkirk with IMAX cameras. So when you see the movie in an IMAX theater, it looks very different. It fills the full screen. The sound has been remixed specifically for the IMAX auditorium, the IMAX sound environment. It's a very unique experience. And when this kind of goes back to Preetham's point about packaging, when you package all that together on the quality side, consumers tend to notice. So for a movie like Dunkirk, we only had 10 theaters showing it in India, and for the opening weekend, we did 24% of the box office in India. So it's something that consumers, if it's packaged right, and the consumers understand it, they'll seek out the experience, be it an IMAX or be it an Epic or what have you. They'll seek it out in order to go watch the movie in the best way possible. So I would encourage you to work with your filmmakers, talk to your filmmakers about ensuring they're making quality, they're doing something differentiated for your cinema experiences. So for example, a movie like 2.0, which is coming out in January, is going to be phenomenal here in India. I think it's going to be just a massive blockbuster. But what I'd encourage all of you to do is not only look into doing a PLF, but look into ways to make sure the quality of your cinema is up to snuff for this amazing 3D production. Be it a new cinema screen, upgrade to 3D, because it's going to look phenomenal. It was shot in 3D. It'll be differentiated. So I would encourage that as well from the content side, and also encourage all your filmmakers to do differentiated content for cinemas.
Thank you. But John, digging further on that, when it comes to the pan-India market, and I'm talking about the cities that go beyond the big metros and beyond the places where IMAX has screens, we're still a hugely local content consuming audience. So of course Hollywood is on the rise in terms of revenues, in terms of the number of films that are released, the number of footfalls that come for it. But if you look at the pan-India picture, it's still the local content, whether it's Hindi or the vernacular content, that is consumed in huge numbers. And so far on the IMAX format, we've had only 2 Indian films, one being Dhoom 3 and the second being the recent Bahubali, that have come in. And it becomes a bit of a chicken and egg situation for the trade to see whether first we should have enough IMAX screens to convert content to the format, or should we first have enough local content coming in which is worthy of the IMAX format for more IMAX screens to be opened. And it probably is a great opportunity for not just IMAX but also for the filmmakers to try and push the envelope in that direction in terms of having more screens and more content simultaneously to draw in the big numbers. Would love to know your thoughts on it, because the others here are still low-hanging fruits. To convert to a better screen is not as costly. To go for a good immersive sound equipment purchase is still a feasible buy for a lot of people. But whether it's making a movie, shooting it in the IMAX format or making an IMAX screen are pretty steep. And somewhere both need to work hand in hand, the content and you as IMAX, to really drive that growth. Would love to know what you think about that.
Yeah, so we've actually done 3 movies in the IMAX format. So there was Doom 3, Bang Bang, and then recently Bahubali 2. And there was a big gap between us doing Doom 3 and Bang Bang and then Bahubali. And one of the reasons was purely economic. We had signed up a lot of IMAX theaters to open in India, but due to construction delays, bureaucracy, or what have you, they hadn't opened yet. So there was we needed to have a certain number of theaters open, which was 10, in order to make it economically viable to start releasing Indian content into our network. And also, what also happened in the meantime is our network in markets like the Middle East and the United States and Europe, where there's a big Indian diaspora, had actually grown as well. So, we then had the opportunity to do Bahubali, and we grossed, I think in India, we grossed a little over $1 million, but in the United States, we grossed over $2.5 million. And it started to make the economics more viable to be doing more and more Indian content. We're going to be doing more Indian content, a lot more of it. We've also changed the way we function in terms of converting the movies to IMAX. We have a technology called DMR, which stands for Digitally Mastered Release, and we're able to do it in a much more cost-effective way for Indian content. So you're going to see those numbers pick up and grow over the next year or so. So we had great success with Bahubali, and I would expect in the next couple months you'll hear about a few more movies that we're going to be doing in IMAX.
Thank you. And assuming that we have a lot of exhibitors in the audience, any questions that you may have for any of the people here, feel free. I see one there. Is there a way you can just pass on a mic to the gentleman there?
Good afternoon. I am Mukesh Mehta. My question is to Senthil sir. For your epic screens, is there any screen dimension which is a must? And second thing is the content which is available normally, is it to be remastered for the epic screen?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. Actually, it's a very important point that I didn't touch upon earlier. So the size of the screen, we're recommending screens of 60 feet and above in width, and the aspect ratio that we're doing is 1:1.89 for the screen. And while you can play traditional content without any remastering, the best experience will be when we remaster the content to fit this aspect ratio and to take advantage of the enhanced contrast that these laser projectors that are used with Epic are capable of. So for both of these things, one of the advantages that we have is that virtually every piece of Indian content passes through our hands for DCI mastering and non-DCI mastering. And while unfortunately Indian movies always work very last minute, and we get sometimes only as little as 2 days to do this, if we had a few extra days, we would be able to remaster to fit these aspects and present the best possible experience on Epic.
Anybody else?
Thank you, sir. Is these Epic screens, are they being planned other than in India, or it is only for the territory of India?
We've planned it only for India for the foreseeable future, but one can never say that it won't go outside. But I think for the moment we have quite a challenge already with tackling this very diverse and large market.
Anybody else
Thank you, sir.
from the audience? Yes, please.
Hi, good afternoon to everybody. My question is to John. I believe one of the reasons that Atmos was able to penetrate the market this well was because they tailored their product a bit to India. If I remember what Raj had said was their products were a bit lower price for India. They had deferred payment plans and they were helping with advertising. Does IMAX have a plan to push deeper into the Indian market by providing any sort of India-tailored options? Thank you.
Yeah, so our business models have changed over the years. And you're going to see a lot more growth in IMAX screens in India. There's various different ways that we've been structuring our deals, and it's gone from where we sell the equipment to where we do joint ventures. We don't do joint ventures in India per se, but maybe we take a lower price for the equipment and take a higher percentage of the box office. So there's various different ways that we've looked at the Indian market to try and expand our footprint in the market, because there are obviously a lot of challenges here in terms of taxes and import duties and what have you. So we have looked at ways, and there are a few things in the works that will make the product more accessible to the market.
Thank you.
I think that should be it. Time to close. Thank you, gentlemen, for your insights. That was lovely. Thank you. Okay, one last, if at all.
Hi, I'm Dinesh here. I'm sure that you have heard this question many times on the Amazon Prime and Netflix having the effect on cinemas. I agree that premium large format will stay relevant. I want to see films like Babaliti in cinemas. But that's one movie in a month, right? So Raj had put some excellent points on saying that, there are, this generation's coming from a mobile first world. So my first screen is a mobile first. A BBC rhymes in the mobile first world. So I'm down the line 15 to 20 years. How do you see this would affect cinemas in the world? Are we becoming dinosaurs of the world, or how do we stay relevant to this thing?
Whom is this question for?
It's open to
Anybody here would like to take it? Preetham.
Well, the cinema is definitely going to stay relevant. Lots of formats have come in the past. Even the introduction of mobile phone itself, there was thought that cinema is going to go out of the window, and people are going to use mobile phone as the means to consume sort of cinema. That hasn't happened. Mobile phones have stayed around for the longest time. If people who attended CinemaCon this year saw a demo of the Samsung LED screen, which is essentially, I shouldn't be saying this, but it's essentially a TV in an auditorium, right? Is that going to change things? I don't think so. It is definitely complementary to where cinema is. With what Christopher Nolan's doing, is he's actually shooting most of these films on film. Not, he's not a big digital fan of using digital cameras and what have you. So, as much as people, or virtual reality for that matter, the first cinema that opened with virtual reality is a cinema in Amsterdam, and I was talking to the guy who made it, and he says nobody can wear the headset for more than 20 minutes. Then came 4DX and the fourth-dimensional sort of multiple brands doing 4D versions of the cinema. So these are all complementary to the mainstream cinema. I don't think anything can replace that. There will be different versions that will come out. PLF, I think, is the only one that keeps the sanctity of what the cinema is, because you can only show it in a large screen. Before Samsung does large screens of LED, that'll be a way to wait. So I don't think, I mean, it'll come. A lot of technologies will come and go, but only stay complementary.
Thank you.